Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wednesday edition of Video Clips. I'll mention I'm wearing my Make Americans Free Again sweatshirts. That's like my uniform these days. Yoga pants and Make Americans Free Again sweatshirts, which will be replaced by Make Americans Free Again t-shirts in the when the weather gets a little bit better. Gosh, I'm craving that. It is so cold in Columbus today. Sun shining, that makes it a little bit better, but it is really cold here. Anyway, last week I featured a short quote from Martin Luther King, got a lot of great input from it. So I'm going to give you some longer information from Martin Luther King, a wise man from whom we can learn a lot. And here it is. We must use time creatively, and the knowledge that the time is always right to do right. Now is the time to make real the promise of democracy and transform our pending national elegy into a creative psalm of brotherhood. This came from, and you'll see the connection to what's going on right now, Martin Luther King Jr.'s 1963 letter from a Birmingham jail. The letter was written while King was detained in solitary confinement for taking part in the Birmingham campaign against racial segregation. After reading an article published in a local newspaper about religious leaders condemning his nonviolent demonstrations, King began to put together his response to them, which led to this very now famous letter. At first, he wrote in the margins of the newspaper he was given. He later moved on to using scraps of paper, and then finally a legal pad provided by his lawyers. After his letter was compiled and typed out by his associates, it was 21 pages of double-spaced type long. I can assure you that it would have been much shorter if I had been writing from a comfortable desk, but what else can one do when he's alone in a narrow jail cell other than write long letters, think long thoughts, and pray long prayers, writes King. The words that came out of that narrow jail cell were not ones of sorrow. They were filled with a rational hope that drew upon the wisdom of many before him. They were filled with a quiet optimism built on his steadfast faith in God and the founding principles of our nation. I have no despair about the future, he writes near the end of his letter. I have no fear about the outcome of our struggle in Birmingham, even if our motives are at present misunderstood. We will reach the goal of freedom in Birmingham and all over the nation because the goal of America is freedom. King was arrested 29 times during his fight for civil rights. But despite this, his rational hope and quiet optimism would produce widespread change. 1 year after he wrote that letter, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act that outlawed racial segregation, and a year after that, it passed the Voting Rights Act that bolstered African Americans' right to vote. When accepting his Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, he left us with one of his most iconic lines, which I've heard often, but I think you can never hear it too often. I believe, Dr. King said, that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. This is why right, temporarily defeated, is stronger than evil, triumphant. End of quote. So I took some inspiration from this. You know, I'm not a whole lot different than the rest of you who are watching these videos. I have to do things every day to keep myself focused and positive and that sort of thing. And I think that we can all be inspired by Dr. King's ability to remain optimistic in the face of setbacks. I mean, we're not in a jail cell, at least not yet, which makes us better off than many people who fought important battles before us. Dr. King's ability to remain fearless in the face of huge opposition. I mean, in our case, the other side is huge and powerful. And they have a few weaknesses, however, which we can take advantage of, one of which is too much hubris and a lot of confidence in their ability to do things that they didn't think through, maybe as well as they thought. Dr. King's ability to hang on to the belief that truth wins out in the end, it actually does, even when people who are lying are much more powerful. And you can go throughout history and see that people get away with things until they don't get away with things anymore. His determination to retain his faith in God even when circumstances were so bleak. And perhaps the one thing that's what we should celebrate more than anything. In the history of the world, godless creatures who no longer have a soul, just bodies with a brain, have never prevailed in the long term. And that's who we're fighting with, godless creatures who are living in bodies that have a brain, but no soul. And therefore, their calculations are usually incredibly off because they have no understanding of humans and human compassion and how much the fight for freedom and independence and justice lives in all humans. They always undercalculate that, and they undercalculate the power of humans who gather together in the cause and in the interest of freedom and justice. So we will prevail in the end. So this is not over. It's not over by a long shot. And until it's over, I offer a couple of pieces of advice. For those of you who are oppressed, don't lose hope, because all hope is not lost. Gosh, if I thought it was hopeless, I'd leave the country, but I don't. And for those of you who are the oppressors, your day will come. Thank you for watching. As usual, I'll pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it, and I will be back to you tomorrow with more news.